Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start out with some very positive news. You know, there's a tendency to think if you look at all these snowflakes that we see out there, you hear some of the millennials, some of the stuff, some of the feedback from the mainstream media and the press, and quite frankly, even some of the videos that conservative people will put out and interviewing people who are millennials, it leaves you kind of scratching your head, wondering if we can ever even overcome the ignorance and apathy. But there's an event happening right now, literally as we're speaking, down in South Florida, in West Palm Beach, Florida, to be more specific. And it is part of the Turning Point organization. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but if you're not, you should be. There's a gentleman named Charlie Kirk. Now, we're not going to talk much about him. You can check it out through Turning Point USA. But he is the head of it, basically, and started it. I think he's roughly about 24, 25 years old. I've seen him speak personally. He is an incredible young man. This is the same guy that has another lady that you might be familiar with now if you follow Twitter much and some of the social media, a lady named Candace Owens, as a matter of fact, young black female, probably in her early 20s. Anyway, these people give me a lot of hope because Turning Point USA has now become a multi-million-dollar platform for young people to express their conservative views, which there are not many outlets for that. It's here at Excluded. We hope to do some of the same things, but I have great admiration for Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk's organization. But they're having what is called the Turning Point USA 2018 Student Action Summit. So while a lot of kids are running around partying, maybe coming home for Christmas for the first time since school started, that kind of thing, over 4,000 young people from all over the country are right now down in West Palm Beach, Florida, participating in this. And you name a major conservative figure, and they're probably speaking at this. I was planning to go down there, but couldn't quite pull it off. We have the next best thing coming up in just a moment, but we have Excluded, fear not, Excluded, like you see right over my shoulder, drop the E, the big X. We have our media team down there covering it right now because unfortunately, as great as this event is, there is very little coverage, if any, in the mainstream media because, quite frankly, it doesn't fit the bill. It doesn't fit the bill of the idea that all the young people are basically snowflakes and anti-Trump and all of that. So check it out. It's Turning Point USA 2018 Student Action Summit. We'll be bringing you reports from it all next week as well. They're compiling some video, and I look forward to sometime maybe next week or when we get back from Christmas vacation. More will be revealed about that as the show goes on. But I was privileged yesterday to be able to do a live Skyped in interview with a young man called Eli. His last name is Schaefer, I believe, but Eli, and he has created this YouTube channel called Slightly Offensive. And rather than me getting into a long explanation of what it's all about, I think this video will explain it. And I had a really good time interviewing this young man. As I say, to see creative people like this, young millennials, getting their feet wet and actually promoting conservative ideals does the old salty dog's heart good going into Christmas. So without further ado, let's play Billy Bob. Let's play the video. Yesterday, I recorded live of me interviewing Eli of Slightly Offensive. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. We got a special guest on the show today. We're doing a live Skype broadcast from an event down in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we're with Eli Schaefer, and he has an organization or a show called Slightly Offensive. It's a YouTube channel, and he's on various other social media, and he's got a growing platform, and he's certainly, if you tune in to what's happening with millennials and conservatives and kind of crossing over with what liberals are trying to do and what young people are thinking, Eli is your go-to guy. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Eli of Slightly Offensive. And Eli, tell us a little bit about yourself and Slightly Offensive.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, I identify as a Black gay woman. So essentially today, the conversation has excluded straight white males. And I understand that a lot of men have voted for Donald Trump to represent him. But as I know before the show started, you're mentioning a little bit, maybe Trump might be caving on some of his plans. So the next step is to join the conversation where we're allowed, which is for people of color, for women, and for those who are LGBTQ. So I just self-identified. It doesn't matter if I really am. That's just what I say I am, and I use that kind of platform to turn liberals on their head and kind of use their logic against them and let them self-implode and have this sort of understanding between each other that you might believe what you believe, you might think what you think, but you don't know why you do these things. And I want to have them sort of reveal to themselves through conversations um, the truth that liberal ideas sound good in theory, but they don't really make sense in practice.
Well, we're going to play a portion of one of Eli's videos in just a moment. But since you brought up and you show this in one of your videos or multiple videos where you've identified as a gay Black female, correct?
Yeah, I don't just identify, I believe it.
I believe you believe it. Well, maybe you can help me with something that has perplexed me. I'm kind of at a crisis with my own life and trying to identify. And I don't know if you've met. This is my psychic sidekick. Now you don't expect much out of him right now. He does his work on Twitter. This is Billy Bob Bass One, his Twitter account, and of course mine is at John Martin Talks. But I've been trying to decide whether I'm a deplorable. Hillary Clinton famously said that, we were all Trump supporters were part of a basket full of deplorables, and I readily accepted my role as a deplorable. But then along comes old creepy Joe Biden and says that many of Trump supporters are dregs of society. So I've been trying to determine whether I should identify as a deplorable or a dreg. I'm leaning more to Billy Bob being a deplorable and me being a dreg, but I'm wondering, could you help me out with that, or can I just choose what I want from moment to moment?
I would say that being a drag or a deplorable both start with D. I don't know any guys who don't like double Ds. So the reality is you're probably doing fine either way, no matter where you identify. But I mean, dredge is a softer word, and who doesn't like soft double Ds?
Well, hey, that brings up another thing that I've talked about on my show a little bit because, all these different, I know you live out in California, am I right? That's your home
Yes,
base? Well,
I
out in,
die every day in California too.
how many actual sexual identities are there now in California?
Um, there's this one identity that kind of people are attracted to cooking utensils where you make grilled cheese. It's called pansexual. And so it's sort of like a cast iron sexual attraction. Now, I don't know what that even means, but
Is
I
that
just,
why you
I
have the spoon I've seen in some of your videos and spatulas or whatever trying to help with that?
think, yeah,
I,
that's borrowing from a friend.
I was wondering about that because to me, see, back when it was just LGBT, and of course now they've gone to Q and the whole, I think there's more identities of sexuality than there are letters in the alphabet. But, I had it down for a while there because I was trying to remember these things so I could speak eloquently and educated about them. So you talked about double D's. Well, my acronym, if I'm saying that right, was Lord God Big Tits. I mean, that's kind of how I identified so I could remember the corresponding aspect. But now they have blown that totally out of the water. It's really confusing for you to talk about colors and everything else. My colors are changing all the time naturally. I mean, I'm one of the few people, I guess I'm a radical, Eli. Maybe I'd ask you about this because I don't have any tattoos. I don't have any colors that God didn't put on me or any holes punched in me that God didn't put or some by accident, I suppose. So I guess that makes me kind of a radical, doesn't it?
Yeah, it not only makes you a radical, but it makes you the enemy of the free people because the reality is, and people in California think you're just one tattoo, one piercing away from being revolutionary. I mean, the actuality that the most rebel thing you can do today is to be straight. Uh, Things only go out of your butthole, not in. And you want to do something crazy like have kids and raise a family. And so, yeah, you're a radical, but radically good for the country at the same time.
Well, I sum up what you just said for me in a very simple way. John Martin here at JMT, I'm open mind, closed behind. I don't know how that would go out in California, but basically that's my philosophy in life. That's how I'm trying to live.
Yes, open mind, close behind, but when you gotta go and let it flow.
I hear you. So let me ask you a little bit about yourself. How did you come to a couple of things? One, this conclusion of your identity that you speak of, and your profession now, which appears to be kind of challenging. I don't know if you're challenging, you're just letting them say it in their own words. Liberals around the country. How did you come to do what you're currently doing?
I mean, what I'm doing isn't novel. People for a long time have gone out and asked questions. The only difference is the media today isn't asking the right question, and they're not asking questions to actually challenge people. And I noticed that there's a ongoing trend where if you ask people things that make them think, they think you're their enemy. And so I have a friend who does something similar in a different style, who helped inspire me, encourage me to do what I'm doing. But actually, I started doing street stuff on accident because I started a studio show. And by the second episode, I had a gun on the show, and some parents called in a fake gun threat to the local high school, saying that my show was going to shoot up, the local assembly. And the poor student who was on my show is still dealing with problems. The FBI got involved. I got shut out of my studio, and so I just had to go to the streets. And that shows you how radical people are. It doesn't matter if you're small, if you're speaking the truth, you're fighting a big fight. And I also realized that there's too many white men in conservatism. So as a person of color, I thought that I could help represent a genre of people on the streets that currently don't have a lot of representation.
I guess they'd probably be really traumatized if they'd have went to high school when I did, because during this time of year, hunting season, I mean, there's a reason why Santa Claus doesn't bring Rudolph down this way, because every guy that I went to school with had a gun, shotgun this time of year in their gun rack because they went hunting before school or after school. So, man, I guess that would have been more than just slightly offensive to some people.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about double D's, but we could also talk about pussies too.
I hear you, man. The pussy hats, man. The pussy hats. I never really understood that. It's what they say: a man struggles for 9 months trying to get out of one, and the rest of his life trying to get in one. So it
Right.
is an
I don't
on.
understand the pussy hats. I don't mind a pussy on my face, but not on the top of my head.
Yeah, I hear you, man. They are a bit. They ruined my honeymoon, so to speak, because I kind of took my honeymoon. Show you how much of a Trumpster I guess I am. My wife and I have been together a while, but we got married on January 10th of 2016, and we actually went to the inauguration of President Trump as part of our honeymoon. I guess some of us are sicker than others. And I didn't know about the women's march, the pussy hats. This old boy was out of touch, man. And I went to see the rest of Washington the next day, and lo and behold, I found myself more than slightly offensive. I think it was crazy.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you're doing right now, because I know you're down in West Palm Beach on kind of assignment. And I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about what you're currently doing and what's happening down there.
Yeah. So basically, I came down to West Palm Beach to investigate strip clubs. No, I'm kidding. I'm actually down at West
You
Palm
didn't
Beach.
play a little golf at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah. No, I'm actually doing inspections of smoke alarms in strip clubs simply for investigation purposes only. But other than that, I found myself at this convention center, which is a student action summit by Turning Point USA, which is a nonprofit organization that's mostly funded by donors that seeks to rally young people towards conservatism through methods and ways that young people get information. And that's mostly through sponsoring what they call influencers. So whether that's content creators, just hot girls who have Instagrams. I mean, you might think it's like how why are conservatives using hot girls on Instagram to open up young minds to conservative ideas? Well, liberals are ugly. So the reality is it's not that hard to find hot conservative women, and the liberals do it all the time. They get these shows on E or on TMZ, and people come for the attraction and the drama, and they get pulled into the liberal politics. So they're saying, hey, let's take real people, their real lives, let's sponsor them, and let's basically promote just young celebrities that uphold the right thing and fight for what's good in this country. And so while people will come for the looks, they're going to come for the personality, they're going to come for the lifestyle, they're going to stay for the politics. And we're here checking out, finding out why this movement is growing so fast, why people love it so much, and what part we might be able to play in it.
Well, you mentioned that you were investigating some strip clubs, and I just want to, one of the things that I try to do is educate young people. And I say, I don't care how old you are. When you're my age, you're young. You are, not me. But just so you know, what do you call the person that has the high score on the video solitaire machine in the strip club?
What do you call the person with the high score, the solitaire machine?
Video solitaire, like playing solitaire.
I hope you're not going to say my dad.
No, well, it might be. Oh. You call him the loneliest man in the world. But anyway, so have there been any surprises of the people you've been interviewing? I look forward to seeing some of your video from it. But I know that right now, for instance, the big news is whether or not President Trump is going to cave in to the Pelosi crowd and not get his border wall funding. He famously kind of threatened that, hey, I'll take the shutdown all on me last week. And now it appears that he's on the verge of just basically caving in to the Democrats. Has there been any talk about that among the conservative millennials you've been interviewing?
I wish people were a little more educated on current events. I think we're in a process of moving in the direction. I think Turning Point and these ideas are so new that maybe young people are so wrapped up in the present that it takes them a few days to catch up. Now, obviously, if we wanted to get the wall completed, if Chuck Schumer would just agree to fund half and then lay his relative Amy Schumer for the other half, we could basically complete the entire wall. And it would probably be stronger than the half we paid for. And if the reality is, and she doesn't get paid that much anymore anyway, so it'd be pretty cheap. But the reality is, on top of this, is that the young people are definitely wanting the wall to be built because, of course, low-skilled workers replace three groups the most prevalently. And one of them that I've noticed, especially in border cities and border towns, is that young people don't work low-skilled and entry-level positions anymore because you have 40 and 50-year-old first wave immigrants and illegal immigrants working in these restaurants, which are supposed to be used to help our young citizens, get into the workforce, learn disciplines, but you can't compete with a 40-year-old. So when you're 16 and, you haven't even figured out how to put on a condom.
Very true. Very true. I wanted to ask you something because I watched some of your videos and I've already become basically an instant fan of them. But I was trying to picture myself trying to do some of these interviews. And I just wonder, is there like a blooper reel? Because I don't see how you keep a straight face. To me, I would be sitting there going after I interview him, say, now you do realize that you are totally full of shit. Not you, but them. They just don't know. It's amazing the level of, it's frightening the level of dumbness that they expose in your videos. I think you do an excellent job of it. But how do you maintain keeping a straight face or professionalism, if you will, while you're interviewing these people that just, for lack of a better word, don't have a friggin' clue?
It's easy to keep a straight face when you're a gay woman. I'm already enough bent up in my identity that the face is not hard enough to keep where it's at. But the reality is that, when you're talking to people and they're imploding on themselves, it's not as funny as you would think. You just sit there and go, nah, shoot.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, like this is a person that exists. And I'm not saying I hope they don't. I'm just like, what if you lived like this? It's funny on camera, but, because you're detached from the situation. But when you're there, you're like, this person votes in my district. Or probably doesn't, but still, and they have the power to vote. This person can make children. And I just cry.
Yeah, and you think about that they're actually supporting him. A lot of them, if they did vote, were one of the reasons why Nancy Pelosi is probably going to be the next Speaker of the House. And, it's pretty scary there. When you look at people like Ocasio-Cortez, it's literally like one of the people you interviewed has now won a seat in Congress.
Yeah, at this point, you get elected MD to Congress, probably would have accomplished more with Pokey than Ocasio-Cortez. She's like a mythical creature that was unearthed and somehow got elected through magical powers. Like, I believe her eyes open wider than her brain.
Well, let me ask you this one last question. I'll let you get back to doing what you're doing. You know, old geezers like myself, and I mean, Don Lemon called me basically the most dangerous man in America, an old white dude. I mean, us old white dudes out here. What would you say to some of us old white dudes and maybe other people that are a bit perplexed when they look at the videos and maybe a little bit scared about what we're seeing from some of these young people? Of course, you're around right now, hopefully a whole different group of young people that will give us hope. But what should we, old salty dogs, old dangerous white men like me, what should we take from your videos and your experience into our own lives?
I think it's that even though liberals seem to be numerous and they seem to be superfluous throughout the country in their influence, when cornered individually, they're unable to stand. And so they do well in groups. They do well in these rallies and together, and they look strong. But one on one, they don't know where they stand. So, sometimes we feel alone as conservatives, or these old salty dogs, might feel like they're dying out or being replaced or not wanted. But that's why people are scared, is because these dogs are dangerous on their own. And so you have to realize that your tactics are going to be different. One man who basically knows what he's talking about could stand the test of a group of 30 or 40 people just by knowing one fact. So I wouldn't be afraid, because these are weak, even though there's a lot. It's like crushing ants.
Yeah, well,
but it's sadder to crush ants.
You know, one of the things here at JMT is we're always trying to help. So I wanted to give you, if I could, a little line you could use. Because I watched this one video you did where you were talking to these, I have to say it, maybe I'm probably sexist for saying, but I don't know what they were channeling. But to me, they were channeling a couple of really hot chicks in bikinis. That's what they look like to me. I don't know that.
You are not incorrect.
We could play it. Gabe, you want to play that part? Can you play that part?
Cars. All right, so you're in college and you're looking at me right now. I mean, you have eyes.
There's
right?
the double
You're not
Ds.
blind.
No.
Yeah.
And you accepting that I am a black gay woman.
Yes.
Why?
You said you wanted to be one, so I guess that's what you are.
Okay, so if I wanted to be a bicycle, would you agree that I'm a bicycle?
I mean, I guess in my head I wouldn't walk past you and think he's a bicycle. But if you kept telling me you were a bicycle.
See, now right there, man, I think you missed an excellent point, because it really would have confused them as being a gay black woman, right? Isn't that what you're, if you'd have said, well, if I'm a bicycle, would you ride me? I mean, I guess some of us are sicker than others, but see, if I were doing your job, they'd probably throw me off the camera there, because
My wife would be pissed.
yeah, I would have just said, hey, if I'm a bike, would you ride me? And see where it went from there. But that's why I say, when you look up my picture, some of us are sicker than others, and I'm in there. Well, I appreciate your time, Eli. I appreciate what you're doing. I look forward to interviewing you more in the process. Any parting shots or remarks you'd like to make?
Just because he's having a hard time and he might be hitting some walls and building the wall, let's not abandon somebody in their weak spots. Let's get back. Remember, there's a GoFundMe campaign right now. It's already reached $4 million. We're trying to reach $1 billion to self-fund a portion of the wall, and we're trying to get GoFundMe to maximize it to get up to $5 billion, so that we can let the government know that if they're not going to work for us, we're going to get things done on our own time.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. And I appreciate your willingness to explore all facets of yourself and show us what we're somewhat up against. So keep the fight going, my friend, and be safe down there, or not that safe, but I look forward to seeing your latest videos when they come out. Oh, by the way, before we close, tell people how they can watch what you're doing.
Yeah, you can watch, just Google Slightly Offensive. Ignore the posts that say I'm a white supremacist and a Nazi. Those aren't true. I'm not a white supremacist. I do hate my producer, but that's about it.
Well, I always tell people, hey, Google it, but remember, Google is of the devil. I'm just saying. So anyway, thanks again, Eli. Tune in to us, Slightly Offensive, Eli Schaefer, he is the, I was going to say man on the street, but he is the black gay woman on the street, taking it to the streets, baby. Keep it going, man. Over and out.
All right. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly enjoyed doing it, and maybe you were slightly offended. His show again is Slightly Offensive. You can get it on YouTube channel, Eli of Slightly Offensive, and he really does take it to the street, to people. He exposes, in my humble opinion, opinionated fact here at John Martin Talks, he exposes the lunacy of the left and what we're truly up against. And really, it's an indictment on our entire educational system that we are producing young people. Of course, we're producing, I don't want to misstep here or misstate, we are in fact producing some extraordinary young people like are represented down at Turning Point USA's Student Action Summit. There's, like I say, 4,000 of them. You can see some videos, check it out, that them chanting USA and this type of thing. They're probably pretty easy to search out, but you're not hearing it on the mainstream media. But Eli, Slightly Offensive, he shows you what we're up against with some young people. That it's I sort of scary, but really what it is sad. And we owe it to these young people to try to educate them about the real world, so I'm hopeful when I see this, and like I say, some people may find some of my comments offensive, some of what slightly offensive as Eli did, but keep in mind that humor is one way to reach this younger crowd, this younger generation, and so I hope people really, when they look at my show, I kind of hope you're like edgy on it, that you're almost not wanting to watch it sometime, but you can't help yourself from watching it. That's kind of the effect I'm trying to create here, because we need to bridge the gap. I see myself as a bridge between basically the foundations of the past, what made our country great, and educating younger people and people who are apathetic to what that really means, so we can motivate them, inspire them to save this country, do anything and everything to save it, to essentially do what the president has campaigned on, which is make America great. Now, you may have seen at the very end of the conversation that I was having with Eli there, and it got cut out a little bit. I apologize for that. We were doing Skype, and this is inexact science, so to speak. And I think our guys and our young whippersnappers, you talk about some great millennials, the people that are working here behind the scenes, and probably we need to bring them out sometime so you can see them. A lot of them are down there right now working with Excluded, covering this event, but they are top-notch people. But it is tough sometimes doing live broadcasts. And what Eli was saying, in case you didn't quite catch it there, because I asked him of any statements he wanted to make, he was talking about President Trump and the perception, if you will, and we talked in depth about this a couple of days on a show. You can always watch our podcast, johnmartintalks.tv, YouTube channel. Certainly right here at Excluded, download the free app. See it at the top of the screen there. Drop the E, the big X, Excluded. See all of our family of shows. We probably at some time in the not too distant future will have some of Eli's stuff up there as well. We're growing here, and so we'll see on that. But, I was chastising President Trump for appearing to cave. And that's kind of what Eli was saying, and I give him a lot of credit. Now, this was recorded yesterday morning, and so he was saying that he was encouraging us, those of us that support President Trump, to kind of stay the course, and that he had faith that the president had a plan and was coming around to it. That's in essence what he was trying to say at the end there. And it turns out that Eli, he might not only channel himself as a black gay woman, but he is a prophet as well, because as it turns out, and we're going into it right now in this story, it appears that President Trump has taken the word of people like JMT and rediscovered his cojones. He's rediscovered his truck nuts. I don't know how they'd be on a golf cart, but because he's supposed to be going down to Mar-a-Lago. But President Trump has grown a pair. Not that maybe he already had them and they were like hiding behind the curtain. But it appears that President Trump is willing to stand up. So we're going to cover this from an article out of The Hill. House passes stopgap bill. Now, I've already told you, Scott, stopgap usually means you're being screwed. Bill with $5 billion in funding for Trump's wall. Now, let me give you a caveat about this before we get any deeper. This is a very fluid story. So by the time we're live right now, by the way, we're doing what we're doing now. We changed our game a little bit. We're broadcasting every day, live streaming on various channels, but especially Facebook Live and YouTube, every day at 10 o'clock promptly. And then we rebroadcast the show at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. On Facebook Live. So you can check that out. There's various ways to see us. And it seems to be working. We're getting more views, getting more response from people, which is ultimately what we want to have happen. Because, and this may sound egotistical to say, but I really believe that what we're doing here at Excluded, and certainly what we're doing here at JMT, is something not only worthwhile, but you desperately need to hear it. Because you're not going to hear it like this. You might not have even heard of what's happening down in South Florida right now with all these young people if it weren't for tuning into shows like John Martin Talks. So as I say about this story specifically, by the time you watch this broadcast, things could change. So I'd say all that. But the House passed a stopgap government funding measure Thursday night that includes $5.7 billion for President Trump's wall on the Mexican border and additional security, raising the odds that a shutdown will begin Friday. So midnight Friday, which today, depending on when you're watching the show, obviously, is today. And so midnight tonight, if the Senate doesn't pass a companion bill and the president sign it with this border wall funding, then we will have a partial government shutdown. And partial is very key to this because, and I might cover it more in depth in a minute, but essentially 3/4 of the government is already passed and funding. It's just 1/4 of the government that, believe it or not, includes like Homeland Security, because that's where the border wall funding would be, that has not been funded and will shut down. But to me, Trump is doing the right thing. Now, I told you on a show a couple of days ago that I was concerned that Trump was going to cave. And I was very critical of President Trump in that. And I still am, in the sense that we have to wait and see how this ultimately plays out. It appears, as I said a few minutes ago, that President Trump is going to stand his ground. Now, I was the first one to tell you that President Trump is a smart guy. He's smarter than me, so I'm not saying he didn't have a long game strategy. And it appears that he does. Now, basically, let me kind of, before we get any further in the article, let me sum up to you the process in case you're not aware of it, because I was talking to some of the young people behind the scenes here earlier, and they really didn't understand the process. And this covers essentially any kind of bill, but we're going to certainly talk about this particular one. So what we had was the Senate passed this stopgap measure. As I say, that means you're being screwed, funding the government into February. So they would meet this deadline of Friday night, midnight. Now, what's been happening in the past, we have not had what you would call a regular budget now in well over a decade. And that means that they pass a budget for the fiscal year X or whatever it may be, and that is what you spend. We've been having a series of stopgap funding measures, continuing resolutions. They have all kind of different names for this for years now. And both sides are somewhat to blame for it. So I'm not going to get too in-depth about it because really there's plenty of culpability to go around. So what has happened here is more of the same. So the Senate passed this bill Thursday that essentially funded the government through into February to make sure there's no shutdown. And then they literally packed it in and went home. So it flipped over to the House. Now the House had indicated, and it appeared they were literally on their way to passing, basically a rubber stamping what the Senate did, because they want to get out. They want to get the heck out of Dodge and go see what Santa Claus brought them or whatever. But the president, at the last kind of minute, yesterday afternoon, as I understand it, put a call, literally an emergency call into Speaker Ryan. Now we did a whole bit on our show yesterday about Speaker Ryan and what he did and didn't do, and we may talk about that more in just a minute again, but check out the show from yesterday. But saying, hold on a minute, Trump called him, said, hold on, come up to the White House, I need to talk to you. So basically they had a little meeting with President Trump, and he supposedly told them, because the president really hasn't spoken publicly about it. He's tweeted a little bit about it. But Paul Ryan then called a press conference and announced that the president has stated that he would not sign the bill that the Senate passed and no bill that comes out of the House if it did not include $5 billion for the border wall. Now keep in mind that the border wall supposedly is going to cost $25 billion. You know you can inflate that. So 25 to 30 billion is, a billion here, a billion there, what does it matter, right? I mean, that's kind of what they talk about. So Paul Ryan said, okay, so they went in then last night and passed a bill that was essentially a carbon copy of the Senate bill, except for two big things. The biggest, of course, being they put $5 billion for the border wall. They also, and when I say this, it really flabbergasts you that Senate didn't do this themselves. They put some money, they being the House, in for basically hurricane relief that happened in the South and Florida and all that. Some money so they would keep going, because they're really still trying to clean up from the mess of Hurricane Michael, I believe it was, up in the Panhandle. So the Senate didn't include that in their original bill. I'm not sure why, but the House put it back in. So what this means is that you say, well, okay, well, because you hear Schumer, and we might cover it, but I'm just going to give it to you basically in a nutshell here. You hear Schumer and Pelosi. Schumer is the minority leader of the Senate, and thank God he still will be, in a sense, minority leader, because we took more Senate seats in the midterm elections. He's come out and said it's dead on arrival, that there's no way the Senate is going to approve this new House bill. Well, you might scratch your head if you don't really understand the system and say, how can that be? Because we still have a majority in the Senate right now, and we're going to have a bigger majority in a month or so. But the problem has to do with what they call cloture and basically filibuster, which in a sense filibuster means that one member of the Senate literally can hold a bill up. And the only way you can stop a filibuster is through what they call a cloture vote, which basically means a closure vote in discussion. Well, it takes 60 votes to do that, a supermajority, 60 votes. And obviously that means that even if 100% of the Republicans voted for it, including, by the way, you have the vice president, in this case Mike Pence, but the vice presidential position is the president officially of the Senate and has the ability to break ties. But the problem is, unless you get to like 59 votes and that Pence could cast his vote, it won't matter. So the Senate has these rules that involve cloture, which is closing discussion, which is in effect shutting down a filibuster. This is not in the Constitution, by the way. This is the Senate's archaic, I think, rules. And really, but this is my opinionated, I believe, as I say, opinionated fact, that the only purpose of these rules is to make sure that the swamp can't be drained. Both sides are guilty of it. They've all done this, and they're all afraid of what they call the nuclear option, which Mitch McConnell, as the majority leader currently, and he will probably be after February as well, he could invoke what they call the nuclear option. Now, they already done this with Supreme Court justices. Actually, the Democrats did it, and the Republicans are still. That's the only time that basically you don't have to have a majority, a vote to overturn a supermajority vote to overturn a filibuster. So Mitch McConnell could, because obviously, and I say obviously, it may be not so obvious, but you would think, or hope at least, that the Republicans would all vote for the wall. Now, that also includes people that are supposed to be going home, like Corker and like Jeff Flake and all those others. So assuming that they actually voted, or they had enough votes to get that Mike Pence could break the tiebreaker, it still would not go to the president's desk, because it would never get to that point. It would never get to the vote because of the filibuster rules, right? So the only way right now, absent Democrats caving, is for Mitch McConnell to do the nuclear option, do away basically with the filibuster, and pass it on a straight, probably party line vote. And then, of course, the president would sign it. And it could become law. So Mitch McConnell has the ability to do that. He is extremely reluctant to do so, and because, and I've said this before, we only have really one party when it comes to like the Senate, and that's the party of big government. It has a right wing and a left wing, and they're both for keeping the swamp. And Mitch McConnell he's a swamp rat. He really is. So I don't know how much pressure we can bring to bear, but we need to do it on Mitch McConnell to actually cave on this and do away with the filibuster vote and see what happens. As I've been saying, we desperately needed a vote to identify who's with us and who's against us so we can primary them next chance we have, which will most likely be 2020. It appears that we got that in the House. But until we get that in the Senate, it really doesn't mean that much because it's all smoke and mirrors. So what happens, there's several scenarios that could happen here. One that I think is at the moment unlikely. It might be more likely two or three weeks from now. But we're going to have a shutdown if they don't vote. And there's going to be a shutdown, period. There's going to be a shutdown because there's no way that the Senate is going to get all of this done, that they would, even if they wanted to do away with the filibuster, they'll never get it done by midnight tonight. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think in this case I am. So the likely scenario right now is that they bring them back in, they don't have enough votes, and the Democrats put on a filibuster, and then it's back in Mitch McConnell's lap, so to speak. At this moment, I don't see Mitch McConnell caving on the filibuster issue. Now, could he a couple of weeks from now when, or ultimately going into the next session of Congress? But there's a big problem with that I'll get to in a minute. It's possible. At this moment, absent some political realities changing, I don't know that that's going to happen. So the most likely scenario at this moment is that they're going to be a government shutdown right through the first of the year, and assuming that the president doesn't cave. Now, this all relies on the fact that Donald Trump is not going to cave. Now, he looked like he was going to cave a couple of days ago. I'm still not. I'm with you, Mr. President. I said I would apologize if I turn out to be wrong. I'm not 100% wrong right now, I'm still willing to apologize, so I hope I'm wrong. But before I apologize, let me give us here at Excluded, JMT, and actually conservative pundits way up the food chain from me a lot of credit. Over the last week, a lot of conservative pundits and ultimately it's you, the voters, have put pressure on the president to stand his ground. And we've kind of propped him up in that sense. At least it appears that way, that he stood his ground. He could still cave. I am desperately hoping that he doesn't. I think it's in his best interest to stand firm. Okay, so back to this likely scenario. So it looks to me like if I had to wave the magic wand, rub Billy Bob's head, and get him to speak to me, I think we're going to have a government shutdown through the end of this year. Now, the Democrats come into power in the House in February, towards the end of January into February. So that still gives time for the Senate, the Republican-led Senate, while we still have the House in Republican control. That's the key to all this, assuming that the president stands his ground. There is a possibility after the first of the year that Mitch McConnell will say, hey, we got to break this impasse because it's only going to get worse when the Democrats take power. And they might do it just before the first of the year and go ahead and do away with the filibuster. There may be some tricks to doing it that I'm unaware of, but doing away with it and passing it and having the president sign it. I think that is not possible right this minute, but a week from now or so, maybe so. Because if they wait till after the first of the year and wait till the Democrats take the House, well, then the Democrats are going to obviously undo what this Republican House just did, and we're going to be starting from square one, and we could literally have a partial government shutdown for the foreseeable future because and put a lot more pressure then on the president to cave. So it's all this stuff is still up in the air. It is going to be an interesting next few days and next few weeks The most surprising thing would be if the Senate literally were able to pull it off tonight to do away with the shutdown. I don't see that happening. I really don't. It is possible, though. But passage of the measure over united Democratic opposition passes the hot potato to the Senate, which is considered a bill on Friday. I kind of went over all of this. Let's see if there's anything that I want to cover before we go into the next day. So let's just read this last paragraph, and then we'll move on to the next story. Two little paragraphs here. Passage of the bill capped a wild day at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, talking about yesterday. And that's only because they're not doing their job. You have to ask yourself, why do they wait till the last minute? And I can tell you the reason is because they all don't want to take these hard votes. They don't want to expose themselves, because ultimately presidents come and go. Mitch McConnell, how long has he been up there? And how long has Chuck Schumer been up there? And for God's sakes, how long has Nancy Pelosi been up there? I mean, these people wait. They believe they can wait us out. I talked about this a little bit yesterday on the show, that they wait us out. They believe they've waited out the Tea Party movement. They believe they can wait out the Trump movement, the MAGA agenda, and that's kind of what they're trying to do. It's up to us, a combination of pundits like myself here at JMT and Excluded, but ultimately you, the voter, that is going to have to, that's why I say you're going to have to come back after the first of the year ready to go to work. Keep liking and spreading the show. Don't give up on that. Take your Christmas break. Take your New Year's. Celebrate your life and the family and all that kind of stuff. By the way, we're having a Christmas special that we recorded actually yesterday afternoon that we'll play on Christmas Day. In case I forget to mention it, we're going to be doing Best Of next week, although Christmas Day I have about a 40-minute special. I hope you will watch it at some point during your Christmas break. And we're a little unsure about what we're going to do after Christmas and going into New Year's. We'll probably do a combination of Best Of shows and maybe some live shows. I can tell you this, that I will post obviously on my Facebook page and those types of things and keep you abreast of what's happening, even if we're doing Best Of. So keep all that in mind. But the main reason they wait to the last minute is not only to cover their own behind, is they just don't do their jobs. They don't do their jobs. They basically sit up there, especially the Senate, man. They twiddle their thumbs quite a bit. Republicans started today planning to hold a vote on a stopgap measure approved Wednesday night to be the Senate that would have kept the government open through February 8th, but that reversed course after Trump said he would not sign the bill. So they started the day with a stopgap measure. So they started the day trying to screw us and wait us out. That's what they started to do. And Trump stood up. Trump listened to the American people, listened to his base, listened to people like me, whether it was me directly. You're welcome, Mr. Trump. And he stood up. Now, the real question is ultimately going to be who blinks. Who blinks in this thing? I personally think that Trump has all the power and authority and support he needs to go through this the long haul. I really do. But we'll see. We will absolutely see. He is absolutely acting from a position of strength at this moment, in my opinionated fact. Okay, so we only got about 12 minutes or so left in the show. I want to cover this resignation of General Mattis. General Mattis, who is the Secretary of Defense, gave a letter that is getting a lot of play, and rightfully so, resigning his post come February. So we're going to cover this. This is from a Bloomberg article. Mattis resigns as defense chief, citing differences with Trump. Defense Secretary Jim, I always get, is it Mattis or Mattis? I think it's Mattis, announced his resignation on Thursday, citing differences over policy with Donald Trump a day after the president abruptly called for the withdrawal of American forces in Syria. So see, here's something I've talked a little bit about this. President Trump was the least experienced from politics. And when I say politics, I don't mean he's not political. He's been involved in politics forever. But he's never, it's really interesting, he's never held elective office, and he wasn't like a military leader like some people like Eisenhower and, of course, George Washington, our first president. So in some sense, he came in without the normal prerequisites to be president. I mean, he probably had more than Barack Obama, but that's another story. So I think President Trump was, I guess the best word I could put out, because I've been searching for it, is it was a bit naive about what was going to happen upon his election. And I say that because to me, if you look at it, I think he really believed that if he won this election, that he could actually, because of his past business dealership and working with all kinds of people to get projects done, that he really believed in his heart that he could persuade Democrats to go along with him on certain issues, like maybe building the wall and that type of stuff. I don't think he really understood how much of a threat he represented to the Democrats, the progressive hardcore left, and the never Trumpers, that he was never going to get them to actually see eye to eye with him, even if they actually agreed with him, which if you go back and look at video, a lot of Democrats agreed with Trump on the border wall before he became president. But they just can't, because see, here's the thing. If Trump ultimately prevails, period, it destroys the whole mythology of the swamp and the establishment on both sides of the aisle. So Trump is a direct threat to the establishment government. You know, I talk about that. We only have a one-party system, a left wing and a right wing. Trump is he could cut that right in two and bust it all to pieces. And that's what he's trying to do. But they are, in fact, very resistant. But I don't, and the other thing is, and it ties in with this, I'm not sure that President Trump really understood just how entrenched this deep state really is. Because it's one of the things that Trump has definitely I talked about his belief in the Democrats. I stand by that he struggled with that. He's really struggled with actually getting experienced governmental people at top positions that agree with him, because quite frankly, and Mattis falls right into this. Mattis is an establishment guy. I like the guy. First of all, I should have started this at the top of the story. Let me back up. I thank you, General Mattis, for your years of exemplary service to this nation. Thank you, sir. And you deserve a great, long, healthy retirement. So I got nothing negative to say about the man himself. So I appreciate him very much, as I do pretty much all of the people who are willing to serve. So I should have said that at the beginning, and I apologize for not saying that. But back to my point, and you're seeing this in all departments, there aren't a lot of experienced people in Washington, and it takes experienced people to wade through all the bureaucratic nonsense that's up there. There are not a lot of experienced people that actually are on the same page with Donald Trump. Now, there are a lot of people who are very qualified that are on the same page as Donald Trump, but there's no way that you could spend, say, 30, 40 years in establishment politics and bureaucracy in Washington and be totally on board with Donald Trump, because you're going to be a product of your environment. And that's what President Trump is running into. He is struggling to get people in key positions that really understand and fully support the MAGA agenda. And the military is establishment. They are. It's just a fact. So a 2-page letter by General Mattis was sent to the president, laid out his convictions on the value of U.S. leadership and strategic alliances, including the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the 74-nation coalition to defeat Islam. I want to read this paragraph, then we're going to break this down because I'm running out of time. You can check all this out at the Bloomberg article. There are many articles about, and you can read the letter. It's up. You can easily see the letter. But because this is what Mattis basically said. I apologize for the names. Because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position, Mattis said in a letter to Trump released on the Pentagon. So let's break these down a minute. Okay, so he's critical of Trump's work with NATO. Now, I can understand that because Mattis is a swamp rat. No, he's not. I hate to say swamp rat. He's an establishment figure. He is. He's spent pretty much all of his adult life involved in some form or fashion. He's obviously been in the military a long time, but if you look as he raises up the ranks and starts dealing with all this political stuff, he is a member of the establishment, pure and simple. He can't. It's almost impossible not to be and serve in the circles that he did. So it's not really a criticism as much as just a state of fact. Donald Trump has come in, and he hasn't tried to destroy NATO, contrary to what the media and probably Mattis himself thinks. Trump has exposed the weakness, the cracks that were in the NATO alliance because they haven't been paying their bills and they're not on the same page. And basically Trump went in there and said, look, here's what Trump is about when it comes to this stuff. Some things he just outright opposes. But when it comes to NATO, he's basically, look, we're going to be what we say we're going to be or we're not going to be. Because Trump is approaching it from a business cycle. He's looking at it saying we're either going to be the greatest. I mean, some people may be offended by this comparison, but he's like looking at it, hey, we're going to be a world-class property that believe, because one thing about Trump, if you've never been to any of Trump stuff, they're all they treat you like you are a king for the day when you go to any Trump property. So he's basically saying, we're going to be everything that the Trump name says it's going to be, or we're not going to be. And if you don't support it, you're not going to be here. Well, he's brought that same attitude to the presidency. You're either going to get with that we're going to drain the swamp and put America first and the MAGA agenda, or it's not going to be. And basically he's done the same thing with NATO. You're going to live up, because all Trump really did with NATO is ask them to live up to the agreement they signed. That is why Trump is radical in so many ways. It's not because he's like far right or whatever. Trump is radical because NATO's a great example. He literally asked them to say, look, we're going to dump this thing if you don't live up to what you actually signed. That's all really in a nutshell what Trump said. And Mattis is basically saying that he doesn't agree with that he's ready to go along and get it because he's part of the establishment. This is what we've always done. So why change it? And then, of course, this thing with the Islamic State. Here's the deal, because we're not going to have time to cover it, but another big breaking story that came out yesterday was Trump told the Pentagon that he wanted them to look into how we're going to get out of Afghanistan. And everybody's like, well, freak out. It's amazing to me, going back to this thing with Syria and Yemen and everything else that's happened military over the last couple of weeks. Trump has exposed the fact that the Democrats and the never-Trumper Republicans are all war hawks. All he's done is mention that we need to get out of... You know how long we've been in Afghanistan? We've been in Afghanistan roughly 18 years, fighting in it and dying in Afghanistan for 18 years. And how much different is it? See, to me, here's the thing. I said this I used to have a streaming radio show a few years back, and this is back during the Obama presidency. And one of the things I said in conjunction with what was happening in Iraq, I said, look, we just need to have a whack-a-mole policy when it comes to terrorists. And by that, I mean we need to pull out of all this stuff, don't put our people there, put satellites over them, and basically say, look, if you show your head, we're going to whack you. Like in Afghanistan, we don't need to be in Afghanistan. Heck, from Alexander the Great all the way to Vladimir Putin, they couldn't deal with Afghanistan, right? What makes us think it's arrogant to think that we could? They don't want our system in Afghanistan. I'm not saying everybody, but basically the people of Afghanistan, I guess they enjoy living in the Stone Age. So my thing is we'll pull out, we'll put a satellite, basically intelligence and all that over them. And if they start training terrorists, we just mother of all bomb them. And that's kind of what I think Trump is saying. Of course, I said this on my radio show, and literally the next day, President Obama came out and said, well, the one thing we don't need is a whack-a-mole strategy. So I take some credit for that. But anyway, we need to get out of Afghanistan. We need to get out of Syria. I can't believe, and I guess it just shows you how much Trump derangement syndrome the progressive Democrats have, because now they're all warmongers. They want us to stay in every conflict all over the world. President Trump campaigned on defeating ISIS, which we're doing in Syria. He didn't campaign on occupying there. He campaigned on getting out of Afghanistan. Remember, he was critical of President Bush Jr. in that South Carolina debate and got a lot of heat for it, but it's right. So President Trump is actually doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Promises made, promises kept. He was going to pull our men and women back. And he's trying to give them more money, more prepared for what's reality. But he doesn't want to see us die in places where it's just crazy to do. Let's see. I got one more minute left. So I say all this to say this. President Trump listened to the people. I'd like to say jokingly he listened to JMT because we were right on track on this. I'm hoping that he will stand his ground. We'll obviously have a lot to talk about over the next few weeks about this shutdown and where it goes. General Mattis, and I hope I said your name right that time, thank you again for your service. But the President Trump, and I wanted to point this out, and I might go a second or two over to point this out. They act like that President Trump and Mattis leaving is like never happened. Do you realize that like the last four, you can check this out, I think it's the last four secretaries of defense only served two-year terms, only served 2 years. So what Mattis is doing is very typical of what Secretary of Defense have been doing for the last decade. But with Trump, it's always extraordinary. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed bringing the show to you as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. It's been a great year up to this point. Our numbers are growing daily. Thank you. Keep liking, sharing the show. As I said, we got a Christmas special coming up on Tuesday, but we're going to do best ofs this coming week. We'll see what happens with the new year and that type of thing. But I want to, from the bottom of my heart, from all of us excluded, from our family to yours, wish you the merriest of Christmases. But above all else, have a blessed day.